Amen.
Today's psalm is 84, verses 1 through 7. How lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord of hosts! My soul longs, indeed it faints, for the courts of the Lord. May my heart and flesh sing for joy to the living God. Even the sparrow finds a home and a swallow a nest for herself, where she may lay her young at your altars, O Lord of my hosts, my King and my God. Happy are those who live in your house, ever singing your praise. Happy are those whose strength is in you, whose heart is in the highways to Zion. As they go through the valley of Baca, they make a place of springs. The early rains also cover it with pools. They go from strength to strength. The God of gods will be seen in Zion. And from Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 through 9. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to everyone. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. As for the things that you have learned and received and heard and noticed in me, do them, and the God of peace will be with you. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Thank you. Good morning. Before I begin today, I have to take this off because it's clicky-clacky. All right. I did this last week too. I will learn one of these weeks what to wear and not what to wear here. I apologize. Okay. Before I begin, after that, I want to disclose a couple of the things that I'm going to be talking about today, because it's never a fun thing to be shocked in a worship service. It's nothing too bad. But I will be talking about my journey to discovery of a deeper meaning of joy, of self-trust, authenticity, sacred attunement to the divine, and ultimately a genuine and profound gratefulness to God that I still need to practice each and every day. The story I share about myself specifically will be around my experience with miscarriage and postpartum depression. I know this can be a sensitive topic, so I want to be transparent about it from the start. I need you to know that I have done the work and healed from this experience, so I'm sharing this with you from a place of wholeness. If you find yourself uncomfortable or feelings arise, there are two practices that I like to offer. The first is the method of box breathing. You breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, and repeat. It's a method of grounding. The next one I like to do is the 5-4-3-2-1 method, because sometimes breathing can trigger more negative reactions than positive. If that's the case for you, this method has you find 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can hear, 3 things that you can touch, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. However, licking your neighbor is highly discouraged. Over the next few weeks, we will be doing a sermon series centered on giving thanks as a spiritual practice, centered on our response to our relationship with God. This week, we'll be talking broadly about what it means to give thanks in all things. And in the following weeks, we will focus on different ways we can express our thanks personally, as a congregation, and in our world. Now, I don't know about you, but when someone tells me to be grateful, my first reaction isn't always overly positive. I think this is because this instruction to be grateful is not offered thoughtfully, but rather designed to brush aside or dismiss feelings of sadness, anger, or frustration. I'm sure you have all experienced this at some point in your life. One period of my life where this stands out most starkly is when my husband and I decided that we wanted to start having a family. And our first attempt ended in an early miscarriage. In the face of my grief and sadness, people tried to offer words of encouragement, but were often uncomfortable and offered platitudes designed to make themselves feel more at ease. Be thankful you know you can get pregnant. Be thankful you're young. You have plenty of time to try again. Be thankful it was an early miscarriage. The later ones are so much worse. A lot of women experience miscarriage at least once. This too shall pass. And while each of those sentiments is infuriatingly true, none of them made me feel like I was allowed to grieve, to process, allowed to feel anything but hopeful for a future, and thankful it wasn't as bad as it could have been. And then after I had our first son, I experienced this constant fear that something bad was going to happen. The need to disaster plan for anything and everything, this horrible mental images that continually reeled through my mind. The need for absolute control, and this disturbing thought that I could just hand my baby to my husband and drive away. Instead of those warm, sunshiny feelings of love I thought I would have, I discovered a fierce and impenetrable need to protect this baby that completely dominated all of my other experiences. And the platitudes I heard this time were, be thankful you have such a happy, healthy baby. Be thankful you have so much support. This is normal. All mothers experience this. This too shall pass. Being thankful is not as easy as we make it out to be in church. It wasn't until about 8 months after my first son was born that I began to breathe again and was able to look up over the fog and realize that that was probably not a totally normal experience. Then I went to a performance, a show by the pastor Rob Bell called An Introduction to Joy, which changed my perspective on hope and thankfulness. In the excerpt I'm going to read to you, Rob Bell is explaining a revelation he had as he listened to the Dalai Lama and the Archbishop Desmond Tutu talk, giggle, joke, and laugh together, even though those two people have seen and been through some of the worst experiences that this world has to offer. They find joy in the small things, despite their experiences and knowledge. Rob Bell says this: there's a lightness that comes from ignorance, indifference, and naivety that doesn't acknowledge sorrow, pain, and the anguish of life. And then there's this thing that happens when you move from that lightness into the heaviness of life. You experience your first dark night of the soul. But if you go all the way through that heaviness, apparently you come out on the other side into some sort of different lightness on the other side of heaviness. A lightness that does not come from ignorance or indifference or naivety. This is why joy is not threatened by pain or loss, angst or betrayal. This lightness, this joy, it wraps its arms around the full spectrum of the human experience. Joy never denies, it never represses, and it never avoids, because it wraps its arms around that full spectrum. I realized that joy was different than happiness. It was a deeper, and fuller experience. And if it could wrap its arms around the full spectrum of human emotion and experience, then I too could find and take joy in the smallest parts of life, while respecting the darker parts that were still with me. I put my trust not in myself, but in the belief that God, joy, the Spirit, could wrap their arms around all the parts of me and hold me together. I was free to turn my face to the sun, to laugh unabashedly, and offer my authentic self to those around me. The very first reading I ever did in seminary brought me to tears, as this idea of trusting myself because I could trust God was reinforced by Audre Lorde, who was an American writer, professor, philosopher, intersectional feminist, poet, and civil rights activist. In her book, Sister Outsider, she wrote about the erotic, not in the shallow sense our culture gives it, but by redefining it in a way of it describing the deep joy and embodied aliveness that connects us to God, to ourselves, and to one another. It is a trusting in the intuition that God has gifted us. She says, "When I speak of the erotic, then I speak of it as an assertion of the life force of women, of that creative energy empowered, the knowledge and use of which we are now reclaiming in our language, our history, our dancing, our loving, our work, and our lives. The open and fearless underlining of my capacity for joy, in the way my body stretches to music and opens into response, hearkening to its deepest rhythms, whether it's dancing, building a bookcase, writing a poem, or examining an idea. That self-connection shared is a measure of joy which I know myself to be capable of feeling, a reminder of my capacity for feeling. And that deep and irreplaceable knowledge of my capacity for joy comes to demand from all my life that it be lived within the knowledge that such satisfaction is possible." Audre Lorde's understanding of joy as embodied awareness echoes what Paul calls rejoicing in the Lord, a joy that rises from trust, from connection, from the deep knowing that God is already moving through our lives. That's what I think Paul means when he says, "Rejoice in the Lord always," because some of the experiences Paul had did not seem something that you would rejoice in. To live joyfully and gratefully is to be awake to God's life pulsing through us, to be aware of God working in us, and be present in every part of our world. But being aware of God in every part of our world is not a natural talent that many people possess. It's a practice that must be identified and cultivated. As the Jewish theologian Michael Fishbane describes it, theology gives us language for what this kind of awareness feels like in motion. In his book, Sacred Attunement, he says, "In ordinary life, the everyday is generally habitual. And when the elemental breaks through, it overwhelms one totally. Thus, their crossing point is not so much an element of consciousness as the place of radical opening and awareness. Theology is thus situated at the border of known and unknown. It is at that nexus that the self seeks God. Spiritual attunement to this divine domain is an attentive God-mindedness in the course of life. It is a task of theology to cultivate this attunement so that one may live every day with God in mind." In other words, he's saying that when the holy breaks into our ordinary days, theology invites us not to run or ignore it, but to pay attention, to wake up to God right here where we are, and to begin living every part of our life with God in mind. These three incredibly different theologians from vastly different cultures and worlds have shaped my understanding of what joy truly is. Joy holds the full spectrum of human emotion, even the darkest parts of me, and shows me how to embrace even the smallest moments of beauty, love, and laughter. Joy is connected to my soul and can be fully expressed when I trust the intuitive, knowing God that God has given me, which enables me to be exactly who God made me to be, unabashedly and authentically. This self-knowing allows me to attune to the sacred in all around me and find God even in the most mundane places. And it is the place of genuine and authentic joy when my spirit is attuned to the divine, to God, in every part of my life, when I discover what I think this biblical description of gratitude really means. Because it's not just a simple thank you when we eat a meal, or a surface level gratitude that we offer when our liturgy or habits prompt us to. Instead, having a heart of thanksgiving can be a spiritual practice we engage in throughout the entirety of our lives. Gratitude and joy walk hand in hand. And to embrace joy, we must also trust our God-given intuition enough to attune our senses to the sacred all around us. The definition of sacred is someone or something close to or created by the hand of God, that they deserve reverence and respect. Someone or something that is so close to or created by the hand of God that they deserve reverence and respect. And here's the secret. All things are created by God. We are all created by God. This world with the rocks and the streams and the bugs and the air and the trees and the animals, we are all sacred. But it is hard, isn't it, to find the sacred in ourselves. So often we notice the things that we lack or aren't great at, our messy homes, when we yell in frustration, when we don't finish our homework, don't give enough to others, or the laundry isn't done. Maybe not that last one. Laundry is never done. But it's hard because the minutia of the day-to-day, it's hard to remember to recognize what has that sacred spark. We have to practice recognizing when we come across that moment between the commonplace and the divine. Many of you have felt it before, that shiver that runs over you when you watch a sunset, that great gasp of air that seems to happen of its own accord when you sit near the peace of a stream, the tears that spring unknowingly to your eyes when humans you've known since they were babies grow into beings of such great light and worth that it takes your breath away, or those God bumps, those goosebumps, the God bumps, when you sit in a worship service and suddenly become inexplicably aware of the divine otherness in the room. These are the moments that are the in-between, when we are thrust from the mundane and experience the divine, where we become acutely aware of the wondrous and fearsome nature of our short time here on earth. And remember to give thanks for the absolutely beautiful and the absolute blessing and beauty we have been given just to be here. As people of faith, followers of Christ, and carriers of his light, we need to practice attuning ourselves to these sacred moments in everyday life. We can practice seeing God in all things as a sustained way of life and thought. This will help us identify every part of our day, of our world, as a sacred moment of the divine. It will teach us to continuously live in a place of authentic, joyous, and eternal gratitude. This will teach us to live continuously in a place of authentic, joyous, and eternal gratitude to God. We start our liturgical series for the next 5 weeks, Give Thanks, with this broad understanding of what giving thanks and living in gratitude to God starts with. We begin by practicing finding divine beauty, joy, and authenticity in all things. Then over the next few weeks, we will talk about how we can express our thanks to God in deeds and actions, personally, as a church, and in our world. So as we begin this series together, I invite you to practice noticing. Pause when you feel the warmth of a hand, the ache of a memory, the sound of laughter, or the peace that comes in a quiet moment. Let that noticing become prayer. Let gratitude become not an instruction, but an instinct, a way of breathing that opens us to God. Because when we begin to see the sacred in all things, we start to live in rhythm with God's own heartbeat. And every breath, every moment, every act of love becomes a hymn of thanksgiving. Thanks be to God.